Yay. Welcome everybody to TTT on youth mental health. I'm Amy Evison at Worcester Addresses Childhood Trauma, and I'm here with my beautiful colleague, Kelsey Hopkins. And we are so grateful and excited to have the Shine Initiative here today. Our first Shine Initiative, you guys did a training for us like 4 years ago when the pandemic was just sort of when they announced that we weren't going back to school. And wow, that was so helpful to have you here and to talk about kind of how we could help kids and what that would be like. And it's kind of mind blowing that it's 4 years later now, like, right? Like, wow. And I'm excited and interested to hear kind of about your mental health experiences and what it's been like and what you're seeing. And I'm, of course, excited beyond belief that my friend Ike McBride is at the Shine Initiative. Ike, if you probably people here know Ike, because Ike is like really the OG of youth work. Like he really is known by pretty much everyone in Worcester. And Ike, you and I, when we ran into each other, had that like moment of like when we started, we're old. Like I shouldn't include you in that, but when I know when I started in this field, there was literally no training to work with people that had serious and significant mental health issues. I worked at the Devereaux School in Rutland, and it was so residential treatment, and the training was watch Marcy, she's good. Like that was literally what it was. And I know like you are right there with me. Like the more you learn about mental health, you feel like that sort of, oh, I wish I understood this better. But the amazing thing is, despite not knowing all we know now about mental health, we're grounded in relationships, right? And that's why Ike is so Worcester famous. He has always been somebody who genuinely sees kids. He sees them, he knows them, he forms relationships with them. And that is really what this work is. That's what's so effective and so amazing about this work. And I'm just so excited. Sorry, I'm like gushing. But I will turn it over to Marissa and Julia and Ike, and they're going to tell us about Shine and about themselves. And I'm just so excited because they really genuinely share my passion for mental health. And that's hard to do. I'm passionate about this stuff. And I know you guys are as well. And I'm so grateful. So I will, no real Zoom rules today. We like probably it's best if you can mute yourself if you're not talking to limit so we can hear our presenters. They're going to leave time for questions. We love that people use the chat and kind of communicate with each other and talk about things that are coming or things that are, relevant to them in the training. That's beautiful too. I think Julia and I are going to be on chat duty, and Marissa is going to be the Zoom screen share. So I really will be quiet now and turn it over to you, Marissa.
Thank you, Amy. Welcome, everyone. So I will share my screen in just a second. When I do that, I can't see anybody else's faces or anything. So Julia and Amy will be monitoring the chat. If you have any questions, write them in the chat. And then, like Amy said, we will have time at the end if you want to ask a question out loud rather than in the chat. I won't be able to see anything, so I will take pauses at the end of each slide. Just if there's a question, Julia and Amy will stop me. For those of you that don't know about the Shine Initiative, we are a local nonprofit founded actually just about 20 years ago. This coming year, 2025, will be our 20th year. We will be having a 20th year gala, so keep that in mind for June. We provide mental health education to middle schoolers, high schoolers. We do parents, caregivers, educators, really anybody that is interested in this information and can help bring it to the youth in their lives, whether that's your own children, whether that's your students that you work with, children you work with in the community. It really applies to anybody because we all have mental health that we need to take care of. So we go into schools and we do presentations kind of like we're going to put on for you guys today. So we do a mental health literacy presentation, we do suicide awareness, and then mental wellness and self-care. Sometimes we combine them, sometimes we just focus on one. And we like to keep our presentations for students on the smaller side, just so we can better connect with our students. They can ask us questions. Same thing with adults. We do keep those groups a little bit smaller, just so, people are comfortable asking us questions and connecting with us, sharing their own experiences. They just feel safer in that kind of environment. So that's a little background about Shine. I'm going to share my screen and get the presentation going. All right. Can you all see this? Julia or Amy, you can see it? Okay. So welcome to Mental Health, Stress, and Self-Care, everybody. So my name is Marissa. I am the Program Associate at the Shine Initiative. I have been with Shine for coming up on 3 years now. I started a little bit after the pandemic. I graduated from Worcester State with my degree in psychology, partially because I love psychology, but also because I love everything that has to do with mental health. I have lived experience with mental illness. I've struggled with anxiety for most of my life, which I'm very open about. That's why I do this job, because I like to connect with people that might be struggling the way I did. When I was in middle school and high school, thankfully, my parents wanted to help me. We just didn't really know where to get help or who to talk to. So I think I could have really benefited from people like us or an organization like Shine coming into my school to talk about this information, because we do it in a very conversational way, a way that makes people feel comfortable. It's just an everyday conversation. So I think I could have really benefited from this, like a lot of students do now. Aside from all things mental health, I am a dog mom. He is my little best friend. And on the weekends, I'm also a wedding photographer. So that's my fun job.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Freitas. I am the second program associate here at the Shine Initiative. I've been with Shine for a year now. This was the first full-time job I accepted post-graduating at Worcester State with my degree in public health. I was driven to work with mental health because of my own lived experience as well, and my own cultural background. I am Brazilian myself. So when I started struggling with my own mental health in high school, I was diagnosed with both anxiety and depression, and I didn't know how to have the conversation with my parents because of the cultural stigma around mental health within my culture. So after I was able to get connected with resources, that's when my passion grew to be able to work with students who identify with the Latinx community and be able to help them find their voice when wanting to talk about their own mental health. Outside of work, I enjoy spending a lot of time with family and friends. I am a Titi to my nephew, who is now 3, so it's really exciting.
Well, I don't feel like I need to introduce myself after Amy's great introduction, but I am Ike McBride. I have worked in this community for over 30 years, working with young people, most famously probably at the Boys and Girls Clubs of Worcester, where I was at for over 20 years. I think one of the things that made Shine so interesting to me was the fact that had I had this information during my 20 years of working in the milieu with young people, I think it would have been something that would have been a great benefit to me. Just understanding and having conversations that, from a generational standpoint, we've never had. I never had the conversations around mental health. It was always, toughen up and don't act crazy and things like that. So coming into a Shine where you're actually having these conversations and putting these conversations at a real level and making them normal again is something that I found was really big for me. As the new member of the Shine Initiative, I only started back in February. There's a lot of learning that has come along with this, as well as the ability to educate people and let them understand that, everyone can help work with anyone on their mental health. And it's not something that, you have to pay millions of dollars for in order to get help with. So I think that was really big for me. Personally, my time, I would love to be on a golf course as much as I possibly can be. And if not there, home with my grandson, because he's the coolest person I know right now. But other than that, I'm just a Worcester guy who's been here pretty much my whole life and just want to see the best for the city.
Thanks for sharing, guys. I just wanted to add, we have two more colleagues. So we are a very small organization. There is only 5 of us. We have our executive director, Sharice Murphy, and our director of marketing and community engagement, Jessica Zakara. So you do have the majority of Shine with you today.
All right, so what we're going to do today, what's on the agenda for us today, is we are going to talk about what is mental health, what are the risk and protective factors, what to look for, and how to talk about it. We're also going to talk about stress, the response and effects on the body. What if it doesn't turn off? Stress is hanging around for a couple of days, weeks, months. How do you deal with it? And then, of course, we're going to talk about wellness and self-care. We'll give you some coping skills. We'll discuss coping skills, and we will talk about mindfulness and grounding, and then some practical tips that you can take with you after the training to move on. And then what's important, I always say this is kind of like Vegas, what's said here stays here, but also on the flip side of that, what's learned here leaves here. So basically, you pick up some things that you can take back and use into practice in your own lives is really what we're here about. But these conversations can get kind of touchy from time to time. Some of us, we share some of our personal experiences. There may be others that may want to share their personal experiences. So everyone has their own story. So we do ask that you be very respectful of that. Sometimes these topicals can be difficult and it can bring up some things for you later. So it's important that you do take the time to listen to what we're saying to you. So, you can take these things forward and think about how you're going to take care of yourself after you go through this training and what you're going to do about self-care. And then one of the things we do at the Shine Initiative is that we believe that everyone is a touch point. Basically, what that means is that not everyone is a doctor or a clinician or a therapist. We are certainly not doctors, clinicians, or therapists, but we do have the ability to talk about mental health. And then if you have the knowledge of how to have these conversations, you can feel confident in having these conversations. So we do believe that anyone and everyone can be a touch point, especially if you're working with young people. Oftentimes, young people will go to their peers before they go to anyone else for help. So educating young people to have these conversations within their own peer groups is one of the big things that Shine does. And we like to make sure that those messages are still carrying over and still consistent for adults as well, so they know how to engage in those conversations as well.
All right, and before I just quickly start this one, with this being a Zoom presentation, obviously feel free to get up and take a break whenever you need. Use the restroom, have a snack, whatever you need. When we do presentations like this in person, where it's an hour and a half to 2 hours, we do take a break in between, but being on Zoom, we won't be taking a break. So if you need to, just take a step away. All right, so getting into what is a mental illness. Mental illness falls under what we call the mental health umbrella. And under the mental health umbrella is one side, which is mental illness, and then the other side, which is mental wellness. So the definition of a mental illness is a condition that affects your mood, your behavior, and your thinking. So essentially everything about yourself in your day-to-day lives. So it affects your mood, that can be positively and negatively, your behavior, there can be different behavior changes, and your thinking will change. Do you really have to call it a mental illness? You don't have to call it that if that's not what feels most comfortable for you. I'm somebody that does have a diagnosable mental illness. I was diagnosed with anxiety, but I personally just say I'm having a bad mental health day. It's just what works for me and it's what's most comfortable for me. Fortunately, we have a very welcoming office environment. So I will just walk into the office and I'll just say I'm having a bad mental health day. You can call it a struggle, you can call it a challenge or a condition, whatever's most comfortable for you. We just want you to talk about it. Everybody has bad days. I think all of us on this Zoom can agree that we've probably had a few bad days here and there. It's a matter of how long those bad days stick around. So when those bad days are seemingly sticking around every single day for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that might be a sign that there's something more going on, and it might be time to reach out to somebody for help, to maybe get a little bit more help than you need to see if there's something deeper going on. So a lot of people ask, what causes a mental illness? Is there a reason somebody has a mental illness? Is there a reason they developed one later on in life? And there's not really one main cause, but there are things that put people at risk for developing a mental illness. We call these risk factors. We separate these into 3 different categories, such as your body, your life experiences, and your mind. So something like genes. Your genes can put you at risk for developing a mental illness, similar to if you have a family history of something like diabetes or cancer. You want to know ahead of time so you know what to look out for as you get older. You know what signs and symptoms to look out for as they might arise. Same thing with a mental illness. You want to know ahead of time if there's a family history, whether your mother, your grandfather, anybody has a mental illness, so then you know what to look out for as you get older. Using drugs and alcohol puts people at risk for developing a mental illness. It does change your brain chemicals. Things like poor physical health or experiencing a brain injury or any type of body injury or long-term chronic illness. Different life experiences such as abuse or neglect, loss or death. Loss or death, that doesn't have to be the loss of a loved one. That could be loss of life experiences. When we present to students, we actually show this exact slide to them and we ask them how many of them experienced the pandemic and how many of them had to do remote learning. All of them raise their hands at this point. So we talk about how they lost out on that life experience during that time, just as adults did. We didn't get to hang out with friends. Students didn't get to go to school and sit in a classroom. Students didn't get to sit at a desk and chat with their friends or sit in the cafeteria and catch up with their friends. They missed out on sports. They missed out on different proms or school dances, school events. So it's not necessarily just the loss of a loved one. It could be loss of certain life experiences. Also experiencing things like bullying or poverty, having unhealthy relationships or friendships. And then things your mind experiences, such as a trauma. So a lot of the times when we're presenting to students, we ask them examples of different traumas. A lot of them give the example of something like a car accident or a divorce. So what's complex about trauma, I'm sure everybody knows that trauma is completely different for everybody, and we all respond to trauma in entirely different ways. And sometimes we have no control over how we respond to trauma. So for example, a divorce, say a mother and a father or a mother and a mother get a divorce, and there's kids in the family. Every kid in that family is going to experience that divorce completely differently. Learning difficulties, having low self-esteem or having a lot of stress in your life, bottling up your emotions and not letting them out. So just one of these can be a risk factor and put somebody at higher risk for developing a mental illness. They don't mean you will develop a mental illness. It just puts you at a higher risk. The good news is there are factors that you can put into place or things that you can do to help prevent you from developing a mental illness. We call these protective factors, and these are what can help. They're also in the 3 different categories: your body, your life experience, and your mind. So things we hear about all the time, like getting regular sleep, engaging in physical activity, understanding your body and eating nourishing food or eating fueling food, having the space to be outside, different trusted adults. And we encourage people to think about having trusted friends and trusted adults, because having just one trusted friend or one trusted adult is a protective factor in preventing a mental illness. Having healthy friendships to help support you and help you get through your difficult days or your negative emotions. Having activities and hobbies to keep you busy and give you a sense of purpose. Having positive self-esteem and healthy coping skills to get you through any negative emotions or the bad days that you could be experiencing. And we'll talk about coping skills a little bit later on, when to use them and what they are. But those are protective factors. Talking about your emotions, whether that's with your friends, with a trusted adult, or with somebody that's a little bit more experienced, such as a therapist or a counselor, even just your primary care doctor. Just having that space and that time to talk about your emotions. Having the support for learning difficulties and support for any trauma that you experienced. So if you're sitting here thinking on the last slide, you're at risk for developing a mental illness, or maybe you already have a mental illness. Just because you're exposed to some of those risk factors, it doesn't mean you will develop a mental illness. It just means you're at a little bit more of a risk, but there are these protective factors that you can put into place if you haven't already. I'm sure a lot of us do some of these already. If not, I encourage you to think about what you can change going forward. These also help if you already have a mental illness. You can start doing some of these to get a little bit better, a little bit faster. Does anyone have any questions before I move on? Julia, is there anything in the chat?
No, you're good to go.
No questions, Marissa, but just I notice, and a lot of people have noticed how much we don't talk about this, and that this hasn't been talked about. I taught mental health at Worcester State for like 17 years. Almost every single student came in with nothing. If they maybe had a psych class in high school, great, but usually nobody gets any sort of information about their mental health, and it's so mind-blowing that we're not doing. So grateful that you're talking about this.
Yeah. Or on the other end is sometimes we're told to do these things, but we're not told why. A lot of the times, I'm sure a lot of you are parents or aunts or uncles, and you tell children, make sure you're going to sleep on time, make sure you're eating good food, make sure you're drinking water, but it's kind of just told to people and not told why you need to do that or why it helps you in your physical and your mental health. So that's kind of why we talk about it as well, so you can understand that it helps both your physical and your mental health, and they coincide with each other. So we're going to go into the signs that somebody might be showing that they might be struggling with their mental health or a mental illness. Again, these are in 3 different categories. So the way that somebody talks, their behavior might change, and there might be mood changes. So starting with the way somebody talks, their tone of voice might change. It might become much more flat. They might become more agitated. It might become much quieter and more soft-spoken. They might talk about being very hopeless or being very overwhelmed. They might talk more negatively just about life in general. You might even have people talk about losing hope, giving up, or even thoughts of death. There might be behavior changes. So a lot of times with students, they might withdraw from their friend group, or they might withdraw from class in general. They might start to isolate themselves. There's sleep changes. So when we're in the classroom, we ask people, if you're not going home with people, how do you notice that someone's struggling with their sleep? You don't go home with your friend and see if they're sleeping at night, but how can you tell in school if they're struggling? And the answer is always, maybe they're falling asleep at their desk. Maybe they're nodding off during lunch. Maybe they have bags under their eyes. That also applies to adults. Whether your friends or your colleagues, you can notice those changes in people if they're just seemingly more tired than normal. There might be a change in appetite and eating. Some people start to eat much more than normal, and they might not eat at all. I'm somebody that loses my appetite when my mental health starts to decline. I just really don't have an appetite at all. Some people might start to use substances and they previously didn't. There might be a drop in grades or a change in appearance. So sometimes people used to love getting dressed up for school. They cared about their appearance, and then all of a sudden they didn't anymore. A loss of interest in activities and hobbies. So that kind of goes with withdrawing and isolating. You might have people that are withdrawing from their favorite after school activities or their favorite clubs. Some people might put themselves in dangerous situations and act more recklessly. And then self-injury and self-harm, which is a very popular one, a very common one, especially for the teenage years. And then physical complaints like stomach aches and headaches. Then there's the mood changes. So these are significant, noticeable mood changes. So prolonged sadness, rage, anger, irritability. That one is very, very common for the middle school, high school kind of teenage years. That one I didn't know was a sign actually until I got this job. And it kind of all made sense for me because that's how I was when I was in high school. I have struggled with anxiety for a very long time, and that's how it would come out for me. My mom would notice I was off, probably because I was withdrawing. I was a little bit quieter, whatever it was, and she would ask if I was okay, and I would get really angry at her for asking. I was very irritable, more so than a normal teenager. So that one, just keep in mind if you have a teenager or if you're working with teenagers, it's very common for that age. You might also have somebody that has an increase in anxiety, or the other end of the spectrum where somebody might not show much emotion at all, or they might be kind of numb. So this is a lot of information to throw at you, a lot of different signs and symptoms to look out for. If it's really overwhelming, take a deep breath, first of all, but just remember to listen to your gut. If you work with students, children, if you have children of your own, or you're thinking of a friend, just remember to listen to your gut. And if something is telling you something is off with that person that you care about, there's no harm in asking if they're okay or if something is going wrong in their life or if there's anything they want to talk about. The worst that they can say is, no, I'm fine, I don't want to talk about it. And then you at least asked your question. You asked them and you showed them that you cared. So from anything from this side, just take away to listen to your gut. And if anything, just ask if anything's going on with that person you care about.
That was a great intro into what I'm going to be talking about, Marissa. Thank you. So on the screen, we have how do you talk about it? So up to this point, we have reviewed risk factors, protective factors, and signs to look for in someone that we may think is struggling. We have conversation starters now on your screen. Before I read any, we like to remind everybody that we present to adults and students that please change the words on the screen to make it sound more like you. These are just some conversation starters if you don't know where to start. So some of the examples are, I'm worried about you and I'd like to know what's going on so I can help. Or I know things can get tough sometimes. Is there anything you want to talk about? You seem a little bit differently. Do you want to talk about it? And also it's okay to be like, is there someone else that's not me that we can connect you to talk to if I'm not your trusted adult or your trusted friend? My personal favorite is I've noticed blank lately. How are you feeling and doing? Oftentimes when we're having mental health conversations with someone that we think is struggling, I like using specific examples because when people are struggling with their mental health, they feel very alone and they think that no one understands or has gone through some of the emotions and feelings that they are currently going through. So even within my own friend groups, I like, for example, saying, I've noticed you've been withdrawing and haven't been agreeing to our Wednesday night dinners. Is there any reason? Do you have different commitment that afternoon that we weren't aware about? Because it just makes them feel heard and acknowledged and seen. And when we're struggling, oftentimes people don't think you're noticing your behavior change. Another thing that we like to bring to the attention of students is and adults are some tips on where to have mental health conversations. So when we're in schools, we like to remind everybody to have mental health conversations in a calm, safe space. So when we are interacting in the classroom setting, we ask an example of what a calm, safe space in their school building may be for them to have mental health conversations. And we'll get examples such as the guidance counselor's office, or even a trusted teacher. If she has a free period, if they can use their classroom to have a conversation with a friend. More often than not, everyone will say yes. And on the opposite end of things, we encourage students not to have these conversations in cafeteria settings, for example, because it is really easy for other students to tune into the conversation. And it's also not a safe space if you are somebody who talks about your mental health. And when doing so, it brings up a lot of sadness. So it's normal for you to cry. And sometimes people aren't comfortable crying in front of other students. It's also important to make sure you're listening and keeping the focus on them. It's really easy to flip the script when we are having mental health conversations because you're going to find yourself relating to what the other person is saying because we probably have walked those same feelings or emotions at some point in our lives, but we aren't there to talk about ourselves. We're there because we are concerned about them, and that's the reason why we started the mental health conversation. So we just remind everybody to keep the focus on the person that you're talking to. How do you respond next? So if you are encouraged to have a mental health conversation with somebody and they do accept your invitation to talk, here is the perfect opportunity for you to make suggestions. And I say that because oftentimes when someone's struggling, they don't really know what they want. So it's okay for you to ask what would make you feel better right now and follow up with, do you want me to just sit and listen? Do you want my advice after you tell me what's going on? Do you want to go for a walk right now? Do you want to listen to music? Do you want to watch a movie? In the office, if Marissa and I are having a bad mental health day, we simply ask each other, what Julia or what Marissa do you need from me today? And then we'll be able to give each other a response. Sometimes I'm like, I want to sit with you today in the office, or I actually need your advice on this. And that's how we continue our own mental health conversation within our safe space. Another important thing to remember is you don't need to fix their problem. Listening can go a very long way and help them a lot because they may have tried to have these conversations in the past, but they didn't have the room to just sit and talk because, again, like I said on the other slide, the person may have flipped to the script and started talking about themselves, and then they were just discouraged to continue talking about their own mental health. Also, validating their feelings. It's okay to tell somebody that you aren't alone and this sucks, or I'm sorry this is the position you're in, but I'm here for you and we can get through this together. Reminding them that you're there for them. And if it feels like you're beyond your ability in that conversation and you continue to feel as though you have a growing concern because they are sharing some vulnerable things with you, it's okay to encourage them to seek professional help and even suggest to help them get started, connect them to the proper resources. And then what if you need to talk? So we also tell our students, if you're sitting here and you feel like you are identifying with what we're talking about, and it's not only just another friend, but you're like, oh, I might be struggling with my mental health. I have been having a bad day for longer than 2 weeks, and maybe I do need to talk about it with somebody. Here are conversation starters for yourself. So you can say, I've been going through a lot and I need someone to talk to, or I've been going through a lot and I do need some advice. Personally, for me, I started my own mental health conversations with my parents by saying, I don't know how to ask for help because I'm really scared to let you guys know that I am struggling. And it's okay to say that too. When we're struggling, we don't really know the resources or the community or the friends that are going to be there through us to walk this journey. And it's okay to say that you don't know how to ask for help, but you want help. And then we also like to suggest to students and adults. I'm a big journaler. I don't know if you guys engage in journaling or some other coping skills along the lines of writing, but one tip that we give to our students is writing it down can go a very long way. And it's not only because you're writing down your emotions, but writing down your emotions helps you process what you're feeling. And I like to describe to our students that when I journal, it's like I'm decreasing the velocity of the bouncy ball in my head. So whenever I'm struggling, I feel like my thoughts are moving so much faster than my emotions can keep up with. So when I'm putting pen to paper, it helps me slow down and be able to identify, oh, I'm feeling this way because of this, and it helps. But furthermore, writing it down can also be a great conversation starter, because sometimes we may feel like we're prepared to talk to somebody else about our mental health struggles, and then you get to that moment and you completely just blank on everything that you rehearsed on. So if you're comfortable with sharing what you wrote with the other person, and if they are willing to read what you wrote about your feelings, you can say, I was totally prepared to have this conversation with you verbally, but right now I don't know, but luckily I did write my thoughts and feelings down. Do you feel comfortable reading this? And after the person reads it, you guys can both pick up and have a verbal conversation about where your thoughts and feelings are. And then now we're going to shift gears and go into stress. So stress is a very natural human response. It is how our brain and body respond to any demand, surprise, or perceived threat. Some things to know about stress is that stress affects everybody. And much like trauma, stress manifests in different ways. And we may all experience the same stressful situation, but we're all going to feel stress differently in our minds and bodies. Not all stress is bad. And when we're presenting to students, they're like, yeah, it is. And we're like, no, sometimes good stress comes about, and that can be test taking. Test taking is a very stressful situation to be in school settings, but if you're studied for it and you're prepared, you might have a positive outcome in the end. Also, sports games can be something scary because we're all walking onto different sports settings and we want to win, but it's positive stress and it's good adrenaline that's going through your body. Also, practicing for a driving exam, for example, is good stress for young adults and teenagers. Long-term or chronic stress harms your health in numerous ways, and we're going to talk about the stress cycle in a little bit. So we're going to identify ways that it does harm our bodies if we are not making sure that we are completing our stress cycle. So what does stress feel like? Much like we separate some of the mental health signs to look for, we like to separate stress into two different ways. So in the body and in the mind. So in the body, stress can manifest with an increase in your heart rate, so your racing heart. It can also manifest with chest pain or your breathing quickens. For young adults and children, stress can come out in crying and tears. Personally, for me, when I have a buildup of stress, I do cry. I'm a big crier. So that's how I know, like, oh, I'm really overwhelmed right now because I can't even handle the emotions that are going on inside of me. So now it's physically coming out of me. Muscle tension. So where am I holding tension and why am I holding tension there for long periods of times? High blood pressure, stomach pain or indigestion. Sometimes when we notice physical symptoms manifesting, we oftentimes automatically think that we're getting sick, and we may not even have a runny nose or a sore throat. So then I encourage you guys to think about, if you are experiencing some stomach pain or indigestion, you can be like, what am I thinking about right now that's causing me to have a stomach ache? On the other end, we have in the mind. Stress can manifest with irritability, short temper, mood swings, feeling overwhelmed and easily distracted. I remember in high school when I was really struggling and I would be overwhelmed and finding myself to be stressed for long periods of times, I would feel very overwhelmed and I would get easily distracted. So I was disorganized in class and I was getting very forgetful, which are very common things. But the way it's very common for stress to feel that way with teenagers.
All right, so now we are going to get into the stress response. I'm sure quite a few of us have heard of the stress response, especially working in this field and working in the trauma fields. It's also called fight or flight, which a lot of people know it as that instead of stress response. It is an instantaneous response to any perceived threat of danger. So this is something that happens in your brain and in your body before you can even choose which response you want, before you can even choose like, how do I want to react in this situation, before you can even think about the danger that's in front of you. So there's a part of our brain that is in the centermost part of our brain called the amygdala, and that is what controls your stress response. So think of it as like a smoke detector in your house. So your amygdala is like your smoke detector, and anytime it triggers the littlest bit of smoke, it will send an alarm throughout your body to turn your stress response on, and you will either fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And the problem with our stress response is sometimes that smoke detector is a little bit faulty, where it's going to detect smoke when there really is not any smoke there. There really is no danger in front of you, but your brain can't tell the difference. So your stress response will be turned on. You will react as if there's a threat, and there really isn't. So it's intended to keep you alive. This is a human response that we were all born with. You know, it was made up a long time ago in our bodies to keep us alive, to keep us protected, and to keep evolving. They're a little bit self-explanatory. So fight, obviously, in a situation where there is any threat or danger, you will fight against that threat. Flight, you will run away from the danger. Freeze, you will get stuck in the situation and just freeze up. And then there's a newer one called fawn. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of it before. It's only been recently talked about, but that one is more of a response to the people that are people pleasers, the ones that avoid conflict, kind of when a threat is in front of them, they just kind of bury their head in the sand and don't want to face that threat. They just try and avoid it. So those are the 4 different responses. Like I said, this happens in your brain and your body before you can even choose how you want to respond. You don't have a say in your response. Your body and your brain just choose it for you. So now we'll talk about how it works. So this example is how the stress response is intended to work if it's properly completed. So imagine you're walking down the street, you're going to get some coffee, you're going to get some lunch, and you see this red car coming at you. Your first thought is probably, oh, this red car's coming at me. Your brain is going to sense the danger. This car is coming at me really fast, and I'm walking on the street. From there, your brain is going to send a burst of adrenaline through your body. I think a lot of us know what that feels like, but what happens then in your body is an increase of energy. Your heart rate is going to spike, your blood pressure is going to spike, and your breathing is going to get a lot quicker. From there, your brain will choose fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. It will choose your stress response for you to survive that situation and to get out of that situation where there is a threat. Your brain will then determine whether the threat is over. And from there, 20 to 60 minutes later, your body and your brain will slowly return to the previous state. So your energy will come down, your heart rate will slowly come down and get back to baseline, your blood pressure will decrease, and your breathing will be a little bit more even. So again, this is what your stress response cycle is supposed to work like when it's working correctly. Sometimes you get stuck in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and sometimes your stress response is triggered when there really is no danger. So we'll talk about what happens if it doesn't turn off. So maybe you've experienced some type of trauma or a major event, and that happened once and your stress response was triggered to protect you in that situation. And then it will continue to be triggered, the next few weeks, the next few months. That situation, that event that you went through will just be a continuous situation, not just that one moment that you experienced. You will experience high stress situations that linger, and your mind will perceive danger where it's not. So on the previous two slides, I kind of talked about your brain where that stress response is triggered, your amygdala, which is the smoke detector. It might detect danger or smoke where there really is no danger. And that's what happens when you get stuck in that stress response. When you get stuck in that cycle and you can't complete it, your mind is going to perceive danger when it's actually not there. And then your body will go into all of those adrenaline, the heart rate increases, your breathing will increase, your body will experience all of that because your brain said there's danger, but there really isn't. So it kind of confuses your brain and your body in that situation. You might have an increase of depression or anxiety, and that's because you're living in a state of survival. So a lot of people experience that during the pandemic and even after the pandemic. A lot of people had an increase in depression or anxiety because it was kind of, what if I get sick? What if I get a family member sick? You're constantly on edge, and that's what happens after even a traumatic event where your stress response is triggered. It's going to continuously be triggered, leading to an increase of fear, sadness, depression, or anxiety. You will have a weakened immune system, and that's because your body says, I don't need my immune system to fight. I'm working so hard on survival. I'm working so hard to protect you. I don't need my immune system. Similarly, similarly with digestive issues, when your stress response is turned on, your brain says, I don't need my stomach. I don't need my digestive system to get through this situation. I don't need my digestive system to fight against this threat. So I'm going to turn it off. I also learned in college, that's why a lot of people get those nervous stomach aches. That's because your digestive system is being turned off. So your brain and your body can focus on surviving whatever that threat is, whatever is making you nervous or anxious in that situation. You might have an increase in chronic high blood pressure. There will be memory and concentration issues. That's because you're focusing so hard on whether that danger is in front of you, whether it's real or not, whether your mind is perceiving danger. You will have a hard time concentrating and remembering things because your brain's focusing so hard on just surviving day to day. And then you are at a higher risk of substance abuse because, when you are experiencing a lot of increased anxiety or depression, you might use substances to cope with that. So does anyone have any questions before I head over to the next slide? That is a lot of information that I just kind of threw at you. No questions?
There's nothing in the chat right now, so we can give it a few more seconds just in case.
Okay. If anyone has any questions, feel free to write them down and you can ask them at the end of the presentation as well. So now we will talk about the impacts at school if the stress response is not being turned off. So if you work in a school or whether you have kids of your own, you might see a lot of these signs with your kids if their stress responses have been turned on and they're not cycling through that whole process correctly. There will be an increase of tardiness. So people might be missing class, missing school in general, high absenteeism, loss of satisfaction with work. So students might not be as happy with their work, or teachers might not be as happy with their own work or how they're teaching. This also applies to adults. You might not be satisfied with your own work as well, whether that's at your actual job or just work you're doing in life. You're not satisfied with how well you cleaned the house, how well you're being a friend, whatever it might be. There is a decrease in attention or needing more frequent breaks. You might have a student that is needing to go to the bathroom a lot more or just needing to go for walks around the school. There is an increase of illness, and that's because a lot of people stuck in that cycle their bodies are focusing so hard on surviving against whatever the threat is that they're becoming sicker more because your body's not focusing on protecting your immune system and protecting your body against any sicknesses. There's a lack of motivation. So not wanting to come to school, not wanting to do schoolwork, probably more so than most teenagers in general, being really overwhelmed or isolating oneself, reduction in productivity and an increase in mistakes. And that's similar to the memory and concentration. There's an increase in mistakes because you're not paying attention as well, or because you're having a hard time remembering what you're supposed to do. So these are the impacts that students could have at school if their stress responses are not being completed correctly, but this also applies to adults and, really anybody, because we all have a stress response.
So now on the screen, we have a few examples of what could be some life stressors for the age group that we collaborate with, whether it's middle schoolers or high schoolers. I'm going to go over a few of them now. So job search in general could be very stressful to middle schoolers or high schools. And this can be overwhelming because if a child may be looking to work to help contribute to household finances, it becomes very overwhelming for them when they're trying to juggle not only their own education, but making sure that they are able to get to work after school and work their hours to be able to contribute to the financial strains that may be happening within their families. And if they aren't needed for that demand within their family, just getting a first job in general or finding another job and relocating is a new and stressful environment and situation for teenagers to have to go through. Other things such as abuse, whether it is physical, emotional, or verbal abuse in schools or within their households, and bullying, illness or injury. If this person is struggling with an injury due to sports related injuries, let's say, for example, they may feel disconnected because they're no longer able to engage in the hobbies that fulfill them and help them work through things that they're struggling with. Death of a loved one, or they may be already struggling with their own mental health struggles, or caring for siblings and parental dynamics, seeing an unhealthy or negative dynamic between parents or guardians, moving, whether it be schools or homes, loss of a home, loneliness and lack of community. And we see a lot with middle schoolers and high schools too. Some life stressors among this age group is breakups for intimate relationships or even disagreements within peer dynamics. And then we have puberty, which in itself is already a lot for students to go through and be able to adapt to the new transition that they're facing within themselves.
So now we're going to talk about coping skills. Coping skills are strategies or tactics to use when in a stressful situation or to help handle difficult emotions. And coping skills can be positive or negative. Are there any of you that have any ideas around what some positive coping skills could possibly be? You can put them in the chat, you can blur them out, whatever you feel.
Exercising?
Yeah, definitely. Moving, getting the body up and moving is always great. Journaling and meditating, I see, those are always great. Julia mentioned journaling earlier. Meditating is always great. Getting outdoors, awesome, always a huge thing to do. Anytime you're within nature, that's a big deal. Breathing in fresh air is a big deal, things like that. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about some of those coping skills. As you can see, they're up there. For the positive ones, humor, relaxation, music and the arts are always very positive. And right as I said that, it popped in the chat right at the same time. We are magical, Joanna. They're perfect timing. And then, of course, problem solving and physical activity, as was mentioned a moment ago as well. And then the negative coping skills, obviously avoidance, self-blame, internalizing what goes on, self-harm, substances, and violence. Now, we all know pretty much about all these different things, and we can highlight a couple of them as we go, but I didn't mention venting on either side. Why is venting on both sides?
because it probably can be helpful and not helpful.
Exactly. Venting has a funny way of working itself out. In the moment, when you are venting, it can be a great thing. You can get some things off your chest, help you relieve the stress that's in your mind because you got it off your chest and you were able to speak to somebody about it. That's always great. The negative side of venting, there's a couple pieces to that. Obviously, talking to a person that may not have your best interest at heart, or you may think you trust that person, but that person may not be as trustworthy as you think. Talking in a place where it's not conducive for you to be venting. If you're like, we talk to young people, oftentimes we bring up the fact that you shouldn't have a venting session in a high school cafeteria. There's other ears around, there's other people around. Sometimes venting can get kind of emotional. You may start crying, and crying in a high school setting or any school setting is almost as attractive as a fight. Everybody starts to pay attention, everybody's looking at you, and then all of a sudden your vent session is turned into, the front page news of the school. So understanding when and where and how to vent. One of the things that the program associates, Julia and Marissa, have taught me about the venting thing, when they talk to one another, they put a timer on it. 5 minutes, here's your vent session, let it go, have it out. I'm here to listen to you for the 5 minutes. That's huge. One, it's protective of the person that is venting, because now I'm gonna hold you to the 5 minutes, so that way you don't get to go down that rabbit hole of all the things that have happened in the last 30 years of your life that have brought you to this moment. You stay on focus and you get out what the real issue is. And then the flip side of it is, for the person who's a listener, it's also great because now I've committed to 5 minutes of giving you my undivided attention, which is huge, because one of the problems with the vent sessions is, everyone has problems. So if the vent session is not timed, or it's just going and it's going, at some point, as the person who is listening, my screensaver is going to kick in too, and all the things that are going on in my life are going to start to kick into my world, and I kind of lose you, and I'm not being the support that I'm supposed to be. So understanding and putting the time limit on it, or giving them an idea or parameters of how you're going to vent. This is what we're going to set as limits for the vent session, so you get that out. And that way you can kind of control it, everything from going off into a different world. And then on the other end of that is the end. You don't have to, at the end, have answers for them. The vent session doesn't mean that you have to come back and tell them, well, this is what I would do. If they ask you, then great, you can offer your opinion. But if they don't ask you, then it's not for you to offer your opinion. Because like we said in the beginning, we're not clinicians. We're not therapists. We're not going to fix everything. If anything, the last bit of advice you would give them is for them to search out someone that they trust, who they can talk to, that is more skills or is a professional that can help them get through the position. But last thing you want to do is turn it around and make it about yourself. And oftentimes when you're the listener in an event session, once the floor is turned around or the person has put down the microphone, the ventee then picks it up and becomes the venter. And that's not really what you want to do. If the person came to you to vent to get it off their chest, then let them do that, and don't turn it into a conversation about yourself.
I'm gonna add real quick, the time limit thing. So when we are presenting to students, Marissa and I like to call it identifying your 5-minute friend, which oftentimes goes hand in hand with identifying your trusted adult or your trusted friend. So if you have a trusted friend or a trusted adult, they're most likely going to be your 5-minute friend too. So just to encourage everybody to remember that. And for adults too, identify within yourselves who your 5-minute friend is if you ever need to have a safe place to vent.
So in the classroom, these are ways for young people and even teachers, educators, to kind of think about, take your mind off of things. If you're in the moment, you're having a stressful moment. One of the things we like to do is called pick a color. In the room that you're sitting in right now, if you pick a color and then you just kind of count how many things you find around that room with that color, it's a great way to kind of pull your mind away from the stress that you were thinking about. It just kind of takes you away from it just for a moment. It's not going to change anything. It's not going to fix any problems, but it's going to redirect your brain for a little bit, to take the stress out of your life for just a moment and give you something else to kind of just focus on. we do that. We do the use your senses. We all have five senses. Some of us have six. I don't know how that works, but I digress. But at any rate, for those of us that still have the five, you pick one of those senses and you look around the room, or how many things can I smell right now? How many things can I touch right now? What kind of things can I see? Those type of things. You just want to look around the room and try to figure out, different ways to use your senses. And the great thing about this is that this can happen in the middle of a classroom, during a lesson or whatever. You can be doing this sitting at your desk. We tell young people this all the time, and it doesn't affect anyone around you. It's just you kind of just refocusing your brain for a moment to give yourself some time to breathe and get out of the stressful moment that you're in. And then for the body, tensing your muscles up and then relaxing them, starting from the top of your head, working all the way down to the bottom of your feet. It's, again, something you can do while sitting at a desk, and no one else will know that you're doing it, but you're just giving yourself a moment just to kind of tense up and release those muscles. And again, just like the breathing, we take a deep breath in, hold it for 4 seconds, let it out for 4 seconds, and you do it again and again. Again, those are things to slow your heart rate down. As they slow your heart rate down, it lets you begin to kind of breathe a little bit, relax a little bit. Those are things that kind of help you in the moment, that you can do yourself to just deal in the moment. You don't need to have a professional telling you to do this. You don't need to have someone giving you the sign that it's okay to do this. You can just be sitting there doing this for yourself, just to focus. And then, of course, one of the best things is to go for a focused walk, and then just pay attention to the things around you. We do this here at the Shine Initiative. During the course of the day, we're just going to go take a mental health wellness walk, and we'll go take a walk, and we'll walk down past City Hall or down to the plaza or something, and just notice the things that are going on around the plaza. It was great when the food trucks were out there, because I got to notice every one of the lunches and the different food trucks that I could eat from. So it's those type of walks that are always good. You get out, you get a moment, and it takes you away from what was going on in that moment that had you a little bit tight. So these are kind of things that we try to talk to young people about on a regular basis, and give them the skills to be able to do these things. Like I said, sitting at their desks, sitting at dinner, sitting anywhere where you're in a moment of stress. Not that dinner should be stressful, but wherever you're sitting at for that moment, having that time to just kind of breathe, think, and take your mind off of the stressful situation and give you something to redirect to is a good thing.
I just wanted to quickly add, a lot of times people forget that our brains and our bodies are connected. Obviously, physically they are, but also, mentally. What's going on in our brains is going to affect our bodies. And so a lot of the time when you're getting really anxious about something, Julia had talked about it a few slides back, what stress feels like in your body, you start to get physical symptoms. Even though you're just thinking about something that's making you anxious or something that's stressing you out in your life, you will feel those physical symptoms. So by doing these physical activities, such as tensing your muscles or do breathing techniques, you'll be able to calm your body down, which in turn will calm your brain down. So for example, the second one under body that says, take a deep breath in for 4 seconds, let it out for 4 seconds, that's box breathing. So people are told all the time, do different breathing techniques, and nobody's told you why to do them or why they work. I just touched on it briefly. It slows your heart rate down, but by taking a deep inhale, you're going to slow your heart rate down. And then when you hold it and then exhale, you'll be able to keep it at its baseline, so your body can come back down from being really anxious. It can calm down, and then in turn, it'll calm your brain down so you can think more clearly in that situation. And those breathing techniques, sometimes they sound so silly. Sometimes I've even done them and been like, this doesn't work. My heart rate is still out of my chest right now. But I've tried to take the time to sit and really do breathing techniques. And I've watched it on my Apple Watch where I track my heart rate. It could be in the hundreds. I'm really anxious about something. I will do a couple different rounds of box breathing or a couple different rounds of another breathing technique, and I'll watch my heart rate slowly go down, slowly from 120 to 115 to 100 to 90 to 85. It'll just slowly go down. You just have to keep doing them, but they do work.
And then getting back to the basics, we all, I feel like I'm echoing. Did I just echo? Okay,
I think
everybody's
that
good.
was, yeah, because nobody else's mic's on, but that's all right. It's fine when you're closer to the mic.
That could be me just being loud. I apologize. We all have basic needs for survival, and we need to check in with those first. As you see the pictures there, these are very basic things that we take for granted on a regular basis. I can tell you right now, I'm sure that there are very many of us that are sitting on this Zoom right now that do not get 8 to 10 hours of sleep every night. I know I am one of them. So understanding those type of things and how they affect your body is huge. Water is a very basic thing that we take for granted on a regular basis every day. You know, getting out in the fresh air and the sunshine, these are things we take for granted. We live in Massachusetts. We're getting ready to hit the toughest part of our year around here, where it gets darker earlier, it's colder. You go to work and it's dark. You're leaving work and it's dark. So it's very important that during the day you're getting outside, you're getting a breath of fresh air, you're getting some sunlight. You know, those are great for stress. They're great for your body. They're great coping mechanisms to just make you feel better. So water, as I mentioned before, is something that we take for granted. We'll all get up in the morning, we'll drink our coffee, we'll grab our, energy drinks, our power drinks, our juiced drinks, whatever it is, but we don't drink enough water. Definitely need to make sure that we're doing that. Eating, making sure you're getting good, healthy meals in your body, especially on a timely basis. Oh gosh, you guys hearing all these alarm sirens outside my window? When you are dealing with your body, and I mean, especially with young people, eating is something that gets kind of tossed to the side. I argue with my son every morning, do you want something to eat? No, I'm not hungry. But then they come home and they want to eat through your refrigerator because they haven't eaten anything all day. So making sure they understand that they have to eat, making sure you yourself understand that you have to eat. Having that great meal in the morning to start your day, having something in the middle of the day to make sure you're keeping your energy up, and then eating good at night. These are things that we, especially as adults, when you're caught in your own little silos of work and life, these are things that get kind of passed to the side. We definitely have to make sure that we're doing these things, especially for our own our own health, but our mental health as well. As Marissa said, body and brain are connected. If you're hungry and you're tired or you're dehydrated, these are things that are going to affect your thought processes. They're going to make you make bad decisions. They're not going to help you stay focused. So you have to be on top of these things. The same thing with sleeping. You're not getting enough sleep. You're irritable the next day. You're tired. You're cranky. You're not helping your team be productive if you're in that situation. And then last but not least, human connection. It is imperative that we get recharged by the people that we love, the people that love us, the people that are our friends, the people that are our connections. You have to take time for them in your life because they do recharge you. Yeah, sometimes they are stressful, but they're the reason why you love that stress, because they're your people. So you've got to make time to get to them, be with them, hang out with them, have dinner with them, have lunch, have breakfast, whatever it is. But you also want to make sure that these things that you're bringing to your lifestyle, you're encouraging them to add to their lifestyles as well, to make sure that they're getting their water, they're getting their sleep, they're getting their human connection, they're getting outside and getting their fresh air, and they're eating well. Now, self-care. These are actions or practices you do on purpose and with purpose to maintain our health and to keep up with our daily life. So saying that, understanding that these are things that you need to add to your daily life, and you need to do it on purpose. It needs to happen. These are things that should happen almost daily, if not daily, but we need to make sure that we're making it a point that they happen, because we do overlook them, as we just mentioned in the last slide, some of the things that we don't do on a regular basis, like sleeping. These are things that we have to make sure we make time for. They're intentional and that they are happening. So self-care, yes, it is intentional. It is recharging, as we mentioned. It is for everyone, because everyone needs to practice some form of self-care. Self-care is individual to you. What I do for my self-care doesn't necessarily work for Julia. That won't necessarily work for Marissa. What they do for their self-care is probably not going to work for me. So everyone has to be individual, and you have to be intentional about being individual with what you're doing for yourself. And then it's essential. If you don't do these things and take time for yourself, it's going to be a problem later on. You need time. One of the things that we say here in the Shine Initiative is to make time for your mind. That's part of the idea. You have to do things that are individual to you, that you make time for, and it's so important that you do that, because if you don't take those moments and give yourself some time just to make yourself feel good, however it is you do that, the stress adds up, and then you start looking for ways to do it that aren't as healthy or that aren't as intentional. You just kind of start jumping into anything you can to try to make yourself feel better because you didn't take the time to do it when you should have. So it is important that you do make time for your mind, make time for yourself. Self-care is not selfish. Many people will look at it as it is selfish because, you know, you're saying you're taking an hour or 2 hours or whatever out of your day and you're just on you. You need that. So it's not selfish, and you shouldn't feel like it's selfish. It's not one size fits all. Again, what's individual to me is great, won't necessarily work for you. Same thing for you. So it's what you like. It's not what someone else is telling you is a great thing. I mean, not that you should never ever try anything new, but when we're talking about self-care, you want to do things that work for you. You're trying to make sure you're doing things that are intentional, directed for you during that time. It's not just the reward. And one of the things, especially with young people, you look at social media, you go down the rabbit hole of social media, and everybody is doing something great with their lives. They're on vacation in this exotic place, or they're, you know, getting a massage, or they're getting a manicure and a pedicure, and they're getting all taken care of. They're getting dolled up, and these things cost thousands of dollars to do. That's not necessarily something that everybody can just jump in and do. So it's not a reward. It's not something that you have to make a big deal about, but you should make it an intentional deal. So it's a little different. You're making a big deal, but you're not making it an over the top. We're going to make sure that everybody on Instagram sees me taking pictures and all that good stuff. You want to make sure that it's something that is directly for you. And then, of course, it's not always comfortable. And I'm sure there's a question there as to why wouldn't it be comfortable? Yes, it's not always comfortable, because if you're in a situation where you are searching or you're seeking therapy, therapy may not be comfortable, but it is self-care and it is important. So if you're in a situation where you need to reach out and have someone and talk to somebody, you know, therapy, a lot of conversations in therapy are not comfortable or easy conversations. So because of that, you know, that makes you understand that self-care is not always comfortable, but it is definitely something that is essential, and you need to make sure that you're intentional about making it happen. So, I mean, I encourage all of you, if you can, figure out a way that you can add 60 minutes a week to your own personal routine to make sure that you're caring for yourself. Me personally, I take 5 hours a week to myself, because when I'm on a golf course, it does not matter who calls me. That's my freedom. So I'm 5 hours away. That's it. Doesn't matter. So you just have to kind of think about those type of things, how they work for your time, your schedule, your family, but make sure that you have the time put in there for yourself.
So I talked a little bit about what I'm going to repeat right now on the slides when we were talking about techniques that we can use in the classroom if we are feeling stressed, and how we can help ourselves de-escalate in that moment. So on the screen here, we have mindfulness, and mindfulness is being fully present in the moment. It's an awareness of your thoughts and feelings without distraction or judgment. So we walk through box breathing with our students when we are presenting, and Marissa had mentioned the benefits of it prior. And then senses, which was the one that we talked about, focusing on one thing at a time and working through our 5 senses. So 5 senses. So identifying 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And then the last one is being aware of your thoughts. Oftentimes when we are feeling very overwhelmed, we find ourselves thinking of more than one thing at once. So we like creating the analogy of just placing some of these thoughts and feelings into clouds and putting them back outside into the world. And then after work, when we do have the opportunity or the space to take that cloud back and acknowledge them, but that's not always we can do that in the moment. So that's why we say put it in a cloud and let it float back and revisit it when you have time. And then grounding is bringing your focus to what is happening physically in your body and your surroundings, being here, here and now. So sound, listening to music, whether it be music that relates to the mood you're in today. So if you're happy and you want to listen to happy music, to continue that. If you are sad and you want to get yourself out of that sad mood, listening to happy music. Or if you're sad and you want to stay in your sad mood because it's okay to allow yourself to feel those emotions, then listen to sad music and just let yourself feel. Connecting with a loved one, we talked about basic need of connection. So making sure you're calling somebody, hearing someone's voice that you love, connecting with them for a few minutes that day. And then sight, reading a book, whether it be your favorite book, or if you want to walk down memory lane, reading a childhood book that brought good feelings to you, watching your favorite movie or TV show. And then smells too can help ground yourself, using your favorite lotion, lighting a scented candle. My two favorite scents right now are eucalyptus and lavender. So at the end of the day, I've been switching it up in my diffuser, and I'm allowing myself to physically smell things that are going to help my body relax. And then touch. Holding an ice cube, whether it be in your hand or putting it directly on your chest, helps regulate your nervous system. Again, it just helps you be in the moment and not focus on what's happening because your attention is now on something that's cold. Wrapping yourself in a blanket or a weighted blanket, taking a hot or cold shower. And then taste. Biting into a lemon that's sour, you're now going to think about what's going on in your mouth, which is going to distract with whatever is happening within your brain. Or chewing something, eating candy, those little few minutes that you're chewing gum or candy is going to help distract yourself from what's going on. And then again, eating something spicy will do the same thing. And then some other ideas we have and we like to share for coping skills are writing, reading, painting, drawing, sculpting, volunteer, giving to others is a natural mood booster, and it doesn't always have to be going out in the community and volunteering. It can literally be the simple act of holding the door for somebody and saying thank you and providing them with a smile. Or if you have the opportunity and ability to pay for someone's coffee behind you, if you are getting Dunkin' Donuts that morning, that's something I intentionally like to do once a month to make sure that I'm giving back to the community. Cooking or baking together, doing something physically, intentionally, and not rush, and putting your attention onto the physical act that you're doing. And then, like we have repeated throughout the entire presentation, the benefits of getting outside and having fresh air, connecting with nature, are natural stress relievers.
And then these are our apps. This is our app on the left side. It is free for everyone. It is only on iPhones, and it is in the App Store, the Apple, the App Store. This is a Mind Matters app, and what you see here, this app is great because you have the little buttons there. You can press, kind of find out what's going on. You have the emotion faces over there that you can press, and when you're going through, if you're feeling these type of things, these will give you back some kind of coping skills. You can add your own personal coping skills onto this app so that anytime you feel like you're going through something, you just press your coping skills and one of yours will pop up to you. The love me button there, you can hit that as many times as you want during the course of the day, and it gives you all these great affirmations on how awesome you are and remind you that you are a great person. So as I said, this is free for everyone, but it is in the App Store and it's only for Apple. We are working on a whole lot of big grants so we can make sure that we can give it to Android users too. So, because it costs a lot of money, but we won't go there. And on the other side, we have Headspace. Headspace is free for educators. This is great. It has a lot of great tools in there that you can use in your classroom or working with young people. And again, it is free for all educators. I do believe if you're not an educator, there are like $12.99 a month or some kind of costs that go with it. But and this is on both Apple and Android as well. And again, free for educators. So it's something that you can use in the classroom or when working with young people in different groups or small groups. But these are both apps that you can download and you can get for your mental health.
Both of these apps are also awesome for yourself, especially Headspace. There's a couple cool features if you're somebody that has a hard time falling asleep at night or unwinding after a long day when you get into bed. That's how I am. When I get into bed, you think I'd be able to, calm down, quiet down my brain, but it's actually the opposite. I get into bed and then my brain just starts to race even more. So sometimes I'll do in Headspace, they're called sleep casts, which is similar to like a podcast for falling asleep or different guided meditations to help you fall asleep and just unwind and let go of the thoughts that are just bombarding your brain at the end of the day.
And then these are our hotlines. On the left are the local hotlines or state hotlines. Samaritan Hotline, Mass Behavioral Health. Great thing about them is that they, I believe, translate in over 200 languages. So if you are someone who does not speak English as your first language, there is a likely chance that there's someone there that can communicate with you, and you can find someone that can communicate with you. On the right side, these are all national helplines. And understand that you do not have to be in crisis to call these. I mean, if you have questions, if you just want to talk to somebody, these helplines are great to reach out to for that. And then also, most of these, if you are calling from Massachusetts and you do call one of the national hotlines, they will redirect you back to a local hotline so that you're speaking to someone who's a little closer and may have a little bit more of a background as to what you're going through just by geography. So.
And obviously, this presentation is recorded right now, but we do have copies of these crisis lines that we can send to you if you have an office or if you have a classroom or even just at your house, you want to have a printed copy for yourself or really anybody in your life that might want to use them. So we'll have our emails at the end of this. If you shoot us an email or type in the chat, we can give you a copy of this specific slide.
And there they are, the emails, just like that, Marissa. You are great. So up top, that's our website, shineinitiative.org. There's our Insta and our Facebook. I don't know if there's anything else, because even if the symbols were there, I probably couldn't tell you what they were. So I'll just stop at what I know. And then, of course, there are individual ones right underneath there if you want to reach out to any of us. And at this point, we are opening the floor for questions and the chat.
I am going to stop sharing my screen, but I can reshare if anybody wants to see a certain slide.
That was so great, you guys. So much helpful stuff. So very practical. Yeah, I would love to hear what other people have to say, or if anything struck you or jumped out. Or, of course, I was thinking about how much everybody needs this information, and we really do hope that people can share out this recording or go to the Shine's website, have Shine at their event. All of this stuff, it's so important. I know those people that are in my age group, we just did not get any of this, and it would have been so helpful to just. And Julia, I loved how you were talking about gearing up to talk to your parents about it. I feel like that's such a real thing that we get so many messages that we shouldn't talk about this. We should be ashamed or embarrassed, or nobody will understand. Keep it to yourself. And that's just really the worst thing we can do, is suffer alone and in silence. So just all of you sharing your own experiences and being out there talking about this, the really concrete conversation starters, I loved. Just so much great information. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to say out loud, I don't know, Wendy, if you saw I responded to your message, I could definitely connect with you about your request on this presentation for October 12th.
The requests are coming in through the chat, you guys.
Yeah, they are. I just see Sue,
the
the North Brookfield Health Fair. If you want to just send us the information, and we will put together a plan of attack and make sure it's something that we can get to. As we mentioned earlier, we are a team of only 5, and 4 are on Massachusetts soil. So we do get stretched a little bit, but we will definitely make it a point to try to get anywhere in Central Mass that we can, and sometimes even beyond.
Sue, you can reach out to any of the three of us or include all three of us as we all three are the program.
Perfect.
Do you
Marissa,
have-
can
do
you
have
drop those
email?
emails in the chat quick?
I'll
Yes.
write them right now.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks, Julia.
You're welcome.
I
You
quickly
can also
want
find that information on our website. Sorry, go ahead, Kelsey.
perfect. I wanted to reflect on the introductory material around there's never a wrong time or person. You don't have to be qualified to talk about mental health. I cannot hear that reminder enough because even sometimes my go-to will be like, oh, well, they need therapy or they really should get some therapy support or they should, right? Like, because people will sometimes you're engaging in those dialogues and conversations. And I've been doing the work to say, pause. Yes, therapy can help them, but what else is in their network? Who else is part of their community? What other resources do they have available to support them? Because realistically, therapy has long wait lists. There's barriers. There's a cost. You have to. It's once a week, if that, once every other week. Scheduling, timing, and so I personally cannot hear that message enough. And so it felt really poignant for me today to be like, I am a resource, and everyone else in an individual's community is a resource to support mental health.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of people think if you don't have a mental illness, then you shouldn't be talking about mental health, but that couldn't be further from the truth because we all have mental health to take care of, like we all have physical health to take care of. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
And then the other side of that is as long as we continue to make the conversation normal and the knowledge is being passed on, especially through young people. The younger generation is amazing right now. These young people are much more educated than I would say my generation was when we were at that age. So because they're having conversations that we would have never had, or they were always taboo, or we weren't allowed to have. So them having these conversations, being in a situation that where they are, allows them to be more supportive to their peers. And I think that's a huge thing. And it's kind of why we're doing what we're doing.
That is so encouraging. Hearing it, some of the content, it brought me back to high school and some of these fifth grade memories of some of my friends really struggling. And as a fifth grader, not feeling equipped and going home to my parents and my community and really hearing, oh, well, that's attention seeking behavior. Oh, okay. We should probably give them the attention though, right? Like, can we help? What can we do? How can we shift the narrative? And it really was a lack of education and this awareness and some of the stigma impacting that, right? There's no fault or blame on the generations above that didn't have the skills to help young me to then help my peers and all of it, right?
Right.
But it is hopeful
Absolutely.
and encouraging that the kids today have the information and are getting it and have the empathy and feel confident to know what to do, right?
Absolutely.
I love that you said that about attention too, Kelsey. I hear that all the time. Like people are just doing it for attention. Attention is a basic human need. Babies die without attention. Like they literally can die without attention. So this idea that wanting attention is some horrible thing that you should feel shame for is absolutely not the truth. And I just love that everyone here really talked about relationships as being central to this. Even if you're not having the conversations about mental health, just having people that care about you, that care about you, that aren't judging you. You don't have to talk about the topic. That
if you send it to that printer, I think.
That has so much value in and of itself. And that is the amazing work that you've been doing, really helping people build their relationships and the protective factors, getting enough sleep, getting enough sleep is another one that I think we underestimate all the time. I know something that's like normal, like irritating for me. If I haven't had sleep, I'm in full out crying mode if I'm overtired. Right. And I think we just forget that that's so much a part of how regulating ourselves.
I also want to add, circling back to what you just said about talking about it with somebody else. And we also like to remind our students that it doesn't always have to be their parents. So we like to give them examples that it can be a teacher, it can be a coach, it can be a guidance counselor, it can be your best friend's parent that is your trusted adult. Because sometimes, like I said in the slide that I presented, the parental dynamics, they sometimes may not have the safe space at home. And they might feel guilty that it's not their parents, but we encourage them to keep themselves safe and trust that somebody else outside their household can be that person for them.
Julia, I also like that you talked a little bit about sort of the cultural factors, and I know, Ike, you probably can relate to that too. This sometimes can, the world of mental health can feel very white, and it can seem like it's really like all the professionals are white ladies. And people in other cultures can feel like it's not appropriate for them to be concerned about their own mental health. And that's, I have heard people say things like, that's white people stuff. That is not real.
Absolutely.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Julie.
When I'm presenting, and oftentimes I do say that, like the cultural background, and I can see some of the students who identify as being Brazilian like myself, they're like shaking their heads when I say, like, your parents just tell you to go to sleep and you're going to be happy tomorrow morning, but that's like not the deal. And they're like, yeah. And so like, even to this day, it's still so cultural.
And I think there's, from my perspective, there's two pieces to that, because there's the cultural perspective of how we grew up with, you didn't really talk about it. There was no conversation around it. You had no tools or things to even lean on. It was just kind of, you dealt with it as it is, toughen up, stop crying, that kind of thing. And then there's the generational side of it. Once again, I'm a little older than a lot of the folks on this. So when we talk about it, there's a difference in the time. When I was a kid, that wasn't a conversation that was very prevalent. No one talked about mental health. You were basically crazy or not crazy or crazy, crazy. Those were your options. And there was nothing in between. You were left at one of those levels. So having these conversations where you're able to talk about things that, for years have been considered taboo, have been considered just frivolous or not taken seriously at all. Now you're having these conversations, but on top of that, you're educating through these conversations, and they're becoming normal conversations, which will change the way the world moves. This generation of young people that we're teaching this information to are gonna move the needle, because that's what young people do. I mean, the world is changing in front of us every day. I mean, we can go through all the different groups and things that were looked at as terrible 25, 30, 40 years ago that now are accepted and they're, welcoming, and everyone needs to understand that this is how life goes. So this is how it is. And I think mental health is one of those things that's been kind of kicked to the back for a long time, and to have it finally become something that everyone's talking about in a positive way is huge, not only for our young people, but for our communities in general.
Hi, Amy and everyone. I'm Charisse Murphy. I'm the executive director at Shine. I had a meeting. I wanted to make sure I hopped in on the very last part. It sounds like it's been a great information session, and you guys have really enjoyed it. Amy, I just wanted to hop in and speak to your point around kind of DEI and making sure that we're using a multicultural lens when we talk about mental health. And I want folks on the call to understand that that is a focus of ours at Shine. Yes, hiring Julia to work with Worcester Public Schools specifically as a bilingual person, and hiring an Ike as a male even, right, to talk about mental health is extremely important. I think that what we are trying to do also internally is take a look at the information that we're putting out into the community. I think a lot of times when we go places, we do say things like, and we're very cognizant of this, no matter where we are, and say something like, oh, I think you guys should journal or take 5-minute walks. And people are like, well, you know what? My neighborhood's not safe. I can't take those walks. What can I do instead? And so we are constantly working on both, I think, using a culturally competent, sensitive lens when we do our workshops and presentations, and also in the programming that we're putting out to the world like this. I'm also looking at some grants and grant opportunities to work with local organizations and touch base with a lot of the different cultural organizations and interfaith organizations in the city of Worcester, and to start having these conversations around mental health and how can we help those communities.
I love that. I love that you brought gender up too, because we know that it's hard for girls and women to talk about this stuff. It's even harder for men and boys to talk about this. The stigma is greater for men and boys to just sort of, we've like feminized having feelings. So if you have feelings, it's like a girly thing. So for men and boys, it's even harder. So I just think it's so, so important that your team is diverse and that you have different people, different identity groups talking about this stuff. That alone sends such a strong message. So grateful that you're here, and thank you for coming and bringing this work to us. And Bill has his hand up. Go ahead, Bill.
Thanks, Amy. As Amy mentioned earlier, and I've often thought in a lot of the work that I do, we never got this as we were growing up. And even though there is a little more wellness in conversations, I still don't see it as much as I would like to see it in the community, in schools, in sports, in scouting, all those areas that youth particularly are attracted to or go through because they have to go to school. Do you folks have any mechanisms that you use to be able to reach out to groups, organizations, communities like that?
You want me to? Yeah,
You got
so,
it.
oh yeah, do you want to? So Bill, thanks for the question, because I think that that's really important. We've gotten a lot of questions around athletic teams, sporting teams. So are you saying, do we go and touch base, just so I understand your question, do we go out and present to those subset groups of the schools?
Yeah, exactly. So that
Yeah.
you're, maximizing and trying to reach as many, kid related organizations as possible.
Yeah, so we, outside of us working at the middle and the high schools all around Central Mass, what we tried to do in this past year in particular was go into community programs. And so we did the boys and, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. We trained their staff. We did Mass EdCo. We did the Dynamic Futures program, which is a program in the summer to help with behavioral health, kind of that pipeline for young people, and those are high school students. I think when we go into schools, and Marissa, Julia, or Ike, you guys feel free to hop in, but when we go into the schools, a lot of times the health teacher or the gym teacher is a nice source for us to go in, and sometimes they can be the coach. What makes it difficult for us is to find all of those different subsets. So we try to reach these larger pockets in hopes that they then disseminate the information down to young people. We do have a youth summit. I don't know if you guys were able to talk about that, but it's a free summit that we have, and it's going to be at the DCU Center in Worcester. During that summit, young people are able to go into 6 or 7 different workshops, and we're trying to get one on sports, kind of sports psychology for next year. But we did have a fitness and wellness person come last year. So those kids who were interested in that and understanding the intersectionality of mental health and wellness, physical wellness, they were able to participate in that. But Bill, if you have any groups in the community that you think we could be a part of, or come in and speak to either young people or the adults working with them, please let us know. And we would love to come out.
Sure thing.
And
Yeah,
just
no, part of the work that I do is reaching out to younger and younger folks to get a different message about how to interrelate better with people that you don't know. And so I'm constantly on the lookout for those same organizations. So yeah, I'd love to be able to have a conversation with you guys about that and get you information like that as well.
Well, one of the other pieces to that is that when we go to the schools and we are in, with the young people, is we encourage them to create Mind Matters teams within their organizations or their school. And these become kind of like the young peer leaders in the school that are kind of taking on the mental health portion of that, where they kind of work within the school to look for, or identify kids that they are struggling, and then how do they put supports around that kid, or who's the trusted adult that they reach out to in order to kind of get that kid on their radar so that they have the supports within the school. So as we start to grow into bigger groups and as we start to do those subsets, we're going to encourage those same things out of those subsets so that they have, some in-place teams that are working on, the mental health piece as a group for whatever that group is.
Awesome. That sounds great. Thank you all very much. This was a really amazing presentation.
Thank you.
Feel free to jump in, anyone who might have thoughts or questions, or it really is. I feel like you're definitely like saving lives with this information. And so it feels like such an honor to be able to get this to more people. And we record them all, and they're there forever for people to refer to. So, you can send them to somebody who really maybe needed to hear this information but wasn't able to make it today. We just want people to know everything that they can about their own mental health. It's just so important.
I'm gonna jump in with the spectrum piece, right? It's not you have mental health or you have crazy mental health or some, right? There's a whole spectrum. And I heard earlier too about your day. Like I'm not having a great mental health day or something like that. I think that was the framing, Marissa. I see you shaking your head, and that framing of it's all a spectrum of, as we move through days, as we move through hours and minutes, even these things are dynamic and evolving. Our emotions are evolving. And so I heard the space, and I'm just formally putting it out there that I heard it, and I appreciate it around that topic too, because it's not an all or nothing approach to mental health here. And it's easy to get stuck in those paradigms, right?
Since we do have a little bit of time, I would love to hear about how things are going in schools and kind of what you're seeing with, are you feeling like kids are doing well? Or are you feeling like they're kind of, we heard from Shine going into the pandemic, and now I know, we're well out of it, but I feel like all of us took a pretty significant hit to our mental health with those couple of years of really not having the social connections we needed. And for kids that are in, junior high and high school now, that happened to them, a really formative time of their lives. And I'm wondering if you guys are just seeing the impact that kids are just more open, or they're struggling more, or what kinds of things are you seeing in schools?
Julia, do you guys want? You guys are in there often.
I think there's sort of a balance between both. Like there are some students who are struggling post-pandemic, and then I also find the students that we presented to be so educated on this topic because it's so much more normalized. And so I see how it increases the need to target like adult population too, just as much as we're targeting the students, to educate them on how younger generations are open to talk about mental health. When I'm presenting to them, they have great feedback. They interact with us a lot. They honestly, before we move on to different slides with risk factors and protective factors, the ones that Marissa shared with you guys, we ask them questions prior to going on to that slide, and they hit like every single point. They know a lot of what we're talking about. And then also when we are presenting, by being in the front of the room, we do see the students who are targeted and get a little bit more sensitive, because we can see them be like, oh, I may be experiencing this right now. So after that, we do bring it to the attention of the guidance counselors that we collaborate with and the teacher in that room as well.
I also just wanted to add similarly to that. I think we do get really good feedback from students. They are so much more self-aware even than from when I was in high school, and I'm only 27. When I was in high school, people didn't talk about their mental health. It wasn't like a taboo subject, but people just didn't talk about it. And I remember like I started to open up to friends, and they would open up to me, and I would be like, oh wow, like we're both struggling with the same thing. And kids are so open now. Even at the end of presentations, two strangers, Julia and I, or Ike and I, are in the presentation, they come up and just start telling us about their mental health. They're so open about it, which is so incredible to see that they're that comfortable already. Julia kind of touched on it a little bit, but what we're seeing mostly is these kids saying, we need the adults in our lives to have this information, whether that's their teachers, whether that's their parents, whoever it is, because they're saying, I know I'm struggling with my mental health. I try and talk about it to my parents, but they don't know what to do, or they tell me it's fine, or they tell me I'll be okay, whatever it is. They're saying we need the parents or the educators, whoever the adults in our lives, to have this information, because there's still the adults that are not believing that the kids are struggling, or there's the misconceptions that they are attention seeking, like we just talked about. So a lot of the time, the kids know this information and they appreciate us coming in. They love hearing from people like us sharing our experiences, but they're just saying, you know, there's more of a need for the adults to have this information so we can talk about it with the adult in our lives, or so the adults can talk about it with their students, and it's just more accepted in a classroom or in a home setting.
I think that was a good point for you to make, Julia, because I think what we do when we do these presentations, and I have the pleasure of still doing some of the presentations with them, is that we are very mindful of the students that we have in the room. And I can remember a presentation Ike and I were doing, and I could see some young people kind of struggling, and I could notice the eye contact changed and some other things. I was a clinician in a past life, so I still have that training and education. And I was able to walk right over to the teacher after the presentation and say, hey, FYI, I just saw this and these behaviors. And before I could finish, he came back in and asked to speak to his counselor. So I think that a lot of times we talk about like mental health and the crisis really that young people are facing in this doom and gloom. I think that us at Shine, right, like we can be pretty shiny, but us at Shine, I really do see a lot of hope. And so I think that that's the good and positiveness that we can walk away with, is that we do these presentations, but the kids are not rolling their eyes. They're extremely attentive. I mean, we had over 300 kids at our summit. And in that, kids were pulling us aside, I know for me, the entire time, and saying like, this is what I just learned. Oh my goodness, can you come to our school? And it just was a constant. And so I think it is a really tough subject to talk about, but I for sure see light at the end of the tunnel when I do this work in the community, so.
I think that you're also looking at, you know, the changing of time. I mean, it's kind of like what it is. I mean, most of the kids that we're dealing with right now, they are more open to having conversations. The conversations that they're having, not only with their peers, but with teachers and with parents, you know, they're different conversations than we were having when I was young. You know, some of the conversations that they're having now, we wouldn't have thought to bring up, you know what I mean, for fear of our lives. So, you know, looking at where these kids are now and being able to speak to their parents about some of these subjects and have these conversations is huge. But what's even bigger is that they're going into these conversations educated and they know what they're talking about, which is a huge piece to this. And like we mentioned, now it's time for the parents to catch up. It's kind of like, you know, the internet. You know, kids picked it up real quick. Parents were the ones going to find out, well, how do I do this? And what do I got to do to get that? And how do I find this? The kids were telling them. And it's kind of like that right now in these kind of subjects, because the kids are the ones that are leading the charge. You know, they want to know about their own mental health. They want to know why they're not feeling well. They want to know why this is affecting them the way it is. It was something that, you know, again, was not talked about before. Now they're having the conversations, and we're very happy that they're having the conversations, and we're very happy that we're tooling them to have the conversations.
Anyone have any other thoughts or comments that they want to share before we call it a day? Please just jump right in. Yeah, it is really great to hear the awesome work you're doing, and not surprising to hear that it's the adults that are sort of kind of falling behind. And I think somebody said it. I do work with the African community, and they often are just like, just pray and you'll be fine. If you just pray, just hand it over to Jesus. Or not that there's anything wrong with prayer or handing it over, but we would not really think that was sufficient in a physical illness. Yet we do with mental illness, and it's not sufficient, right? It can help, it can be really a protective factor, but it's not that simple. It's so much more than that. And there is real, I used to have that stat right at the top of my head about how many people like seek help, right? Help is available. It's that people don't even ever ask for it or seek it. It's right. The gap is more about getting to the help. That the stigma of mental illness keeps us from talking about it and keeps us from getting treatment. We have treatment. We saw today that even just in an hour and a half, people felt like they were much more educated and had tools and really dramatic answers, support, ways to go about doing this. And that's huge. Yeah, they still hear get over it. Yeah, there's still, I have a cartoon that I use that like talks about the man's feels like he's dying, and if it's physical illness, we're like, oh my God, we better help you. And if it's mental illness, we're like, a lot of people have it worse than you. Come on, get a real, like as if it's not real. But we all here right now, we all know that suicide is very real, and that is, you can lose your life to mental illness the same way you can to physical illness. And probably most of us know more people that have lost their lives to mental illness than we'd like to. It's real. It can be deadly to not address your mental health.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we could, if there's nothing else, we just will one more thank you to the Shine Initiative. And Therese, thanks so much for joining us. I'm so grateful to meet you and to hear about how things are going. And you guys were amazing. And I'm just so glad we have this resource.
Yeah, we got a good crew.
You really do. Thank you so much. All right. Hearing nothing else, we will share the recording out when we have it, and hope that you will continue to have these conversations. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Amy.